been campaigning over the last 3 months, and win or lose, we're all still here, and I think that's one of the hugely important parts of holding an event like today, to remember the past, but also to make sure that individual ups and downs are much less important than us keeping going. So before we start the formal proceedings, we just want to remember the fact that today is the first day, the first bodenstown that's been held since Sean Garland passed. It's obviously a hugely significant moment for us and a sad moment for us, and I just want to hold a short moment of silence just to remember Sean and the huge leadership and inspiration he provided for everybody from the members who've been here for 30, 40 years and above to people like myself who've only just joined, and just to take a few moments to reflect on that. Thank you. So we'll begin today by asking the party president, Michael Donnelly, to give the annual oration.
Comrades, you're very welcome. So once again, we gather here at bodenstown to commemorate the life and political work of Wolfe Tone, Theobald Wolfe Tone. And we're here to commemorate his revolutionary vision back in the 18th century. But above all else, we're here to re-energise ourselves in our determination to take inspiration from and continue to complete the great tasks that Tone and his comrades set for us and set for the future generations to follow after them. He was, in his relatively short life, many things. He was a barrister at law, a husband, a father, but above all, he was a radical activist who protested at injustice and against the profound political and socio-economic inequalities of his time. It was, in essence, out of this sense of protest that he came to recognise and acknowledge the truly revolutionary nature of republicanism as articulated and promulgated during the latter decades of the 18th century. He instantly recognised in it the fullest, most radical expression of his humanity and his concern for people, especially those oppressed by their social, economic and political masters. And influenced initially by the earlier Revolutionary War of Independence in America, but more significantly by the truly revolutionary and radical programme of the French Revolution and its declaration of a People's Republic. This was a truly revolutionary event, and it stands there in greatness and significance with the great October Revolution of the Bolsheviks in 1917. And for Tone and his comrades, they weren't mere witnesses of history. They wanted to be part of that, and they wanted to achieve that for Ireland as well. They wanted to shake off the shackles of oppression, and that became their objective, to organise and mobilise the men of no property became their principal means. This was then the truly revolutionary nature of the Republican project. The liberation of the great majority of people from their economic and political servitude and to give them true liberty and freedom. In doing this, Tone and his comrades were not merely aping or recanting a new dogma. They were, in fact, closely involved and immersed in the truly international character of republicanism. They both travelled to and frequently corresponded with the revolutionary figures in France and drew particular inspiration from their successful abolition of the oppressive institution of monarchy. And in attempting to do the same in Ireland, they were then acting in a truly internationalist manner and fashion. It was to be a major revolutionary attempt to out with the old and bring in the new. In acknowledging that, we must also recognise that they were not mere visionaries, dreamers of a new world. Far from it. Yes, Tone and his comrades did indeed have vision, but it was a vision that was deeply rooted in their present conditions. They were direct products of their age, the age of radical economic and social change. And by the latter decades of the 19th century, or the 18th century, the industrial capitalism had emerged and was laying down strong roots, particularly in the England of the time, but also in Ireland. And with that came many unavoidable but critical changes in the social structure of the time. The old aristocratic dominance that had prevailed since the early Middle Ages was increasingly being challenged by the new capitalist bourgeoisie class, who, as they increased in numbers and in wealth, were becoming increasingly dissatisfied, indeed profoundly most unhappy with their lack of political power. It was also, of course, creating a new and potentially even more radical revolutionary class, the working class or the proletariat. This then was the age when the social, the economic and political divisions of our contemporary society were actually being constructed and laid down. So this then was the social and economic context for Tone's political actions and his total embracing of republicanism. Back then, the most revolutionary thought yet to hit the Northern Hemisphere. It was a worldview that held all people to be equal in rights and in privilege, and that none should be oppressed by others. And if they were, then not only had they the right, but a duty to rise up and overthrow their oppressors. Today, we in the Workers' Party are products of our age. The age where that capitalism that was emerging in Tone's time is now totally dominant in Ireland and has captured all the commanding political, social elite positions of dominance and rule. And they use that dominance to ensure their continued unfettered control over the scarce economic and material resources and to continuously enrich themselves at the expense of the many, the workers and their families, the many who toil to produce the wealth that the rich consume. And like Tone and the United Irishmen, we are part of and integral to the emerging class consciousness of our age. A consciousness that those who produce the great wealth of the age receive little of it in return for their labours, and that the owners of capital expropriate the rest for their pleasures and their consumption. And just as Tone and his comrades drew inspiration and ideals from the radical new republicanism of their time, so we too took that republicanism and made it the backbone of a new socialist critique of modern capitalist society. If the essence of the republican ideal was of a free and equal people, then just as Tone and the United Irishman recognised back in the 18th century, such a condition was not possible without the overthrow of the aristocratic and monarchical order. We recognise similarly that a free and equal people in modern Ireland could not happen, could not be achieved without the total overthrow of the new aristocrats, the aristocrats of capital. If that is our task, our historically determined mission, comrades, then the question is, how exactly do we do that? We do know that no change, revolutionary or otherwise, happens automatically. Change is a consequence of at least two things: the existence of material conditions that permit it, even demand it, and the existence of those who are prepared to make sure that it happens. In essence, comrades, as most of you already know, the true agent of revolutionary change can only be a revolutionary party that is dedicated and committed to effecting that very change, particularly when the time is right and the conditions that demand it exist. We are that revolutionary party, comrades. Let's not forget that. Whatever trials, tribulations we have been forced to endure since the great betrayal of the early 1990s, we have not been crushed, we have not been defeated, we remain in existence, and we are still seeking that same revolutionary change that we sought and fought for back in the more successful era of the 70s and the 80s. But the time for simply looking back and admiring our past is over. We need not to look again towards the future. We need to re-engage with enthusiasm and vigour in a highly organised, disciplined way to once again pose the greatest challenge to capitalism that it has ever faced on the island of Ireland. That remains our task, our historically determined task, to engage with and to lead the new men and women of no property in their ongoing struggles against the tyranny of capital and oppression. To organise them, to educate them, to ultimately mobilise them, firstly in resistance, and ultimately in storming the bastions of power and privilege to take full control of their lives and livelihoods. That still remains our great task, comrades. We know well enough now from long and hard experience what has to be done. The hard bit, however, seems to be actually doing it. But that is what we must now do. We must re-engage in the building up of a strong, vibrant and disciplined revolutionary party, one that is fit for its historically determined purpose. One that is capable not only organising resistance and protest, but that also fully develops its organisational skills and political vision to render it capable of leading the Irish working class to ultimate victory in the tense and extensive class struggles of our time. Struggles over housing, health, pay, and poverty. Without such a party, comrades, there cannot and never will be change, radical or otherwise. Successful revolutions are always those that are guided by, first, a clear and unambiguous theory of action, and secondly, led by a vanguard of highly organised and disciplined cadre of revolutionaries. But only when the conditions are right. And our task is to prepare for that to happen, to make it happen, to ensure that there is a vanguard party in place to lead that revolution, to plan for it, to organise for it, to get out there and organise our class, be involved with them in their daily routines and struggles, to mobilise them in campaigns of protest against their social and economic oppression, and more than ever to be their party, their representatives, to be the organisational expression of their desires, their needs, to be integral to and inseparable from all that they are and do, and ultimately to be their agents for change, their revolutionary party. Until and unless we do precisely that, comrades, there will be no radical change to Irish society, let alone a revolutionary one. And if we are to be truly the party that derives its genes from the radical revolutionaries of Tone and the United Irishmen, then we must take responsibility for our actions and our lack of same. We know that a revolutionary party is urgently required. And alone, amongst other pretenders, I will say, we have the experience, we have the tradition, we have the organisational ability to once again be that party that will give a radical voice to working people, to work with them and organise them in achieving their needs. As I said earlier, without such organisation, their needs and wants will ultimately go unmet, because, as you well know, the entire socio-economic and political system is heavily weighted against them, not only in theory, but in practical terms as well. That, then, comrades, is what confronts us at this moment in our history. Indeed, of the history of all great struggles against socio-economic and political oppression, not just here in Ireland, but throughout the world. Wherever working people are, there is a need for a revolutionary party to guide and inspire, to mobilise and lead, and ultimately to take power itself. So as we leave here today from the final resting place of a man who more than most inspired not just our generation, but those that came before, we must look earnestly at the great tasks that face us. And when we do so, not to shirk from recognising the urgent need to renew, reinvigorate our focus, our energy, and be determined once again to step forward and be the urgently needed vanguard of the coming revolution. Thank you very much, comrades.
Now calling Joe McGowan to sing.
Pushing around the public singing and speaking there and do the song. The name is from a trade union, Scottish trade union group called the Lagan. Back a bit. Come all of you workers who work night and day, by hand and by brain, to serve your pain, who for centuries long past, for no more than your bread, have fought for your country and counted the dead. In the factories and the mines, in the shipyards and the mines, you've always been told, lads, keep up with the times, for your skills, they're not needed. They've streamlined the job with stopwatch and slide rule. Your pride they have lost. Aye, but when the sky darkens and the prospect is war, who's given a gun and then pushed to the fore and expected to die? for the land of their birth, when they've never owned one handful of earth. He's the first one to start. He's the first one to die. He's the first one in line for that pie in the sky. And he's always the last when the cream is shared out. For the worker is working when the fan carts about. It's all of these things that the worker has done, from tilling the fields to carrying a gun, and you're yoked to the plough. Since time first began, and now we're expected to carry their can.
Thanks very much, Margaret. So just before we finish up, if the band are around, they might emerge, play us out with the national anthem. But before we finish up, just to let everybody know, we're going back to the Bridgewater Inn in Sallins for refreshments, and it's the same place we've been the last 2 years. Nobody has been here. So do we have the band to play us out, or should we replace accordions? Accordions. Okay, Paddy. That's Mr. Fitzsimons. Paddy, would you mind singing the national anthem to finish up?
It's a great one. It's a very sad occasion for me today, because normally I would be spending, or we would have spent the weekend with Sean and Mary in Innishteague, and this is the first year that I haven't seen them. And not to forget all our comrades, men and women, who defended this party when it was needed. They should be honoured as well. The Marys, the Rita Whelans, the Mays, all of our comrades, men and women. Sjön fina fall att ta dig lägger vindar slung parting där i höjn Bejvårds besör Shantir Oration kör fasta Ni akbar Benturana Bentral Lagan i skräckes Kan höger kan barsnoser Shalip Tani Aran. We are the States.